A child is dying in Palestine every 15 minutes. There's no more safe havens for Palestinians. Schools are being targeted. Hospitals are being targeted. Israeli Prime Minister himself has come on TV several times to proclaim that these installations, which are supposed to be safe havens during times of war, are being targeted because Hamas is taking refuge in them. So what is your understanding of what actually is happening?
You know, these a couple of weapons behind, a couple of guns behind the MRI machine. And initially there was like one or two, then it, expands to four. These very tepid journalists from CNN or the BBC, to their credit, even went publicly, went on a broadcast saying that some of this doesn't add up. It's hard to now claim that Israel is following, the international humanitarian law and specifically the laws of war.
And I know for a fact that when you're trying to transfer one sick ICU patient, it takes hours, if not days, of planning to ensure a safe transfer. And how are they supposed to carry entire ICUs, sick babies on incubators, on ventilators, in matter of hours? And we're not even sure if that was even the case.
It's like when they speak about how we allowed them to get away and evacuate from the hospital. I mean, it's as if that this is some type of a concert or in a movie theater in which they're asking people to casually leave, etc. For God's sake, this is a hospital. These are patients, many of them critically ill. You don't just, as you know much better than I do, kind of evacuate, people
don't just up and go,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of the authorities, the Director General of Ceasefire Hospital said that this will take weeks, if not months, to get these patients and transferred to somewhere safe.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Amina from New Wave Global. As we enter into the 7th week of Israel-Palestinian conflict, it has become one of the most deadly conflicts in modern history. The death toll continues to rise. Even by most conservative counts, it has surpassed 11,000, most of them women and children. A child is dying in Palestine every 15 minutes. There's no more safe havens for Palestinians. Schools are being targeted. Hospitals are being targeted. Refugee camps are being targeted, all under the pretext that Hamas operatives are hiding in these installations, that Hamas operatives are taking refuge behind innocent Palestinians. They're hiding in tunnels under the hospitals. While Hamas continues to deny these claims, Israeli Prime Minister himself has come on TV several times to proclaim that these installations, which are supposed to be safe havens during times of war, are being targeted because Hamas is taking refuge in them. To weed out the truth from all the media rhetoric, to distinguish myth from reality, I have with me today Professor Junaid Ahmad, who teaches religion, law, and global politics, and is also the director of the Center for the Study of Islam and Decoloniality. Assalamu alaikum, Professor. Thank you for joining us.
Assalamu alaikum. Good to be with you.
Thank you. So, like I was saying, there's been a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of confusion out there. We get one version of the story, and then there's another version of the story. And it's really becoming more and more hard for people to understand what's actually happening, what the ground reality is. Like I said, Hamas is claiming one thing, Israelis are claiming another. There's no direct communication from Gaza or West Bank at all. People are in the dark from as far as that standpoint is concerned. So what is your understanding of what actually is happening? And if there is actually the reason that Israel is proclaiming for targeting these safe installations is actually true?
Well, I think that what's going on in terms of the ongoing Israeli assault in the Gaza Strip, and particularly in northern Gaza, in which it's very clear that they are, as they say, raiding, which of course not only entails now the ground invasion, but of course the continuation of the massive bombardment campaign, whether through F-16s and F-35s, Apache helicopters, or drones, with often 2,000-pound bombs being dropped. I mean, one of the most egregious displays of this was when they bombed the Jabalia refugee camp, and we know, much of our viewers will know that obviously Gaza is one of the most densely populated areas in the world.
Correct.
Within Gaza, the Jabalia refugee camp is one of the most densely populated places within Gaza, and so it's hard to now claim that Israel is following the international humanitarian law, and specifically the laws of war, in terms of distinguishing between civilians and combatants, or the issue of proportionality. So there's a pattern now of this. It's becoming clearer and clearer that civilians and civilian infrastructure are being targeted, and that has nothing to do with what they said was the aim of kind of eradicating Hamas. The over 11,000 people killed, how many of them are Hamas members? Obviously, we don't know the exact number, but what we do know is that the overwhelming majority are civilians, and half of them are children.
Women and children. More than 3/4 are women and children, and they're obviously not Hamas militants.
Exactly. And so this is the reality. These are the facts. No one is disputing these that we have in front of us. Even Secretary of State Blinken had to concede finally, well, too many Palestinian children have been killed, which begs the question: is
one wonders how many is too many? Yeah.
Right. How many is okay to kill? So, but so these are facts that even the most ardent supporters of Israel cannot deny, and are not really denying. In terms of this nonstop Zionist talking point of these hospitals and other civilian infrastructure being used as a form of a human shield for the Hamas militants, in the case of the grotesque takeover of the Al-Shifa hospital, we have the Israelis claim that there's the major command and control center of Hamas there, or underneath there. And after days, and beginning before that, but really in a major offensive way on November 15th, what they could produce, it's almost cartoonish. These a couple of guns behind the MRI machine, and initially there was like one or two, then it expands to four. And even in this case, the embedded journalists, because the Israelis do not let these foreign media journalists roam about without their permission. In fact, that's why they're embedded. They have to be constantly with the Israeli Defense Forces, the Israeli army. And so these very tepid journalists from CNN or the BBC, to their credit, even went publicly, went on a broadcast saying that some of this doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
And the suspicion, which they said explicitly, that some of this footage has been edited. And of course, the Israelis are outraged at even the suggestion, and they deny it. But even you don't have to be kind of a seasoned reporter. Even the layperson can see that some of this, as I said, is just bizarre and cartoonish, the way they put out some video.
Right.
I think they have to, because again, the incessant emphasis that, well, there's a lot of Hamas presence here, and so they have to put out some videos to even attempt to kind of assuage and the concerns of the vast majority of the world about what it's doing. And so they put out these videos about these weapons here. And now, just yesterday, they claim to have found the tunnel underneath finally, and they give the footage of the entrance to the tunnel and so on. I mean, we must remember that the vast majority of these underground tunnels were actually built when Israel was occupying Gaza back in 1982, in the early 1980s. Hamas was founded in 1987. Hamas did not even exist then. And so, many of these, the Israelis themselves were kind of responsible for. And initially, the Palestinians just used this for food, medicines, other smuggled goods to trade, and so on and so forth. So, there's nothing new. One can say that, perhaps Hamas, particularly since the Second Intifada in the early 2000s, kind of then use these not only for the purposes of food, because we have to remember since 2006 and 7, when Hamas won, a very brutal siege and embargo blockade was imposed on Gaza, in which all of these things were incredibly difficult to get in. And so these tunnels were like the lifeline to get basic necessities of life, including food and medicine. And of course, for Hamas also kind of, as a defensive tactic, also getting their weapons. But of course, we know that most of the weapons have been homemade weapons. These are not these are not fighter jets.
Sophisticated,
Exactly. There's not fighter jets and these things that Hamas is making. They have no Air Force, no Navy, no sophisticated army or anything like that. And so, these, but again, I mean, they have not produced any evidence of of Hamas and Hamas presence. Forget about that. They're saying that this was literally the command center of Hamas. I mean, you would think that they would find some and they could show them to the videos that and so on. And all we've seen is patients. We've seen virtually everyone in the ICU unit having died or being killed, etc., because of the siege.
Exactly. And what I was gonna add to that was that when questioned about these attacks and giving people a chance to evacuate and something, they keep saying, oh, they were given hours to evacuate, or they were given some notice to evacuate. But how was this evacuation going to happen? What was the logistics? Nobody has elaborated on that. I mean, I'm a critical care physician, and I know for a fact that when you're trying to transfer one sick ICU patient, it takes hours, if not days, of planning to ensure a safe transfer. And how are they supposed to carry entire ICUs, sick babies in incubators, on ventilators, in matter of hours? And we're not even sure if that was even the case, even if they were given even that window. And where were those people supposed to go? Was there an alternative place? Was there an alternative care option for them to go to?
Absolutely. I mean, it's like when they speak about how we allowed them to get away and evacuate from the hospital. I mean, it's as if that this is some type of a concert or in a movie theater in which they're asking people to casually leave, etc. I mean, for God's sake, this is a hospital. These are patients, many of them critically ill. You don't just, as you know much better than I do, kind of evacuate. People
don't just up and go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of the authorities, the Director General of Shifa Hospital said that this will take weeks, if not months, to get these patients and transferred to somewhere safe in which the care can continue and all of that. And the Israelis just say, just leave. We're giving you the permission to leave. It's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous, and it's insane. And I mean, I don't know who takes that seriously. I don't know how you can take that seriously. And and so that was for this brief window in which they say that. And now, of course, they're not letting them leave. Because again, the expectation would be is that these hospitals, and especially Al-Shifa Hospital, because it's the biggest one, would be a safe haven from what Israel is doing all around it, the heavy bombardment and so on. But of course, that has not been the case also. I mean, they have engaged in sniper fire and raids on certain levels of the hospital, and of course, like occupying it. I mean, how grotesque it was, where like one of the first things they did was go on the roof of it and put an Israeli flag, literally as if like this is some type of a colonial occupation. You know, again, so I think that, I think that what the Israelis are now doing is just basically the same way they blockaded Gaza. That's what they're doing to the hospital, and trying to find something. I don't know if it's just a crude joke or something, but again, for global public opinion, they will repeatedly try to produce some type of a edited cartoonish video that can say that, look, oh, we found some gun here, some weapon there, and this and that. Again, this is not evidence. This is not evidence of anything. We don't know. It's basically that we have to go along with whatever the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces statements come out. Oh, but that's not evidence. All governments, especially the Israelis, are pathological liars when it comes to these types of things.
There's no independent reports from there, so there's no way to verify whatever the Israeli narrative is. Just leading on to what you just mentioned was that when they went in and took over the hospital, they actually put a flag down there, which kind of portrays that they're taking over the hospital in particular and the region in general. What do you think would be the aftermath of this? I know there's a lot of speculation. It's all up in the air, but from your perspective, experience, conversations, what do you think is going to be once Israel takes over, be the governing body for the region?
Right. Well, it's important to point out that these attacks on hospitals have not abated. In fact, just today, the report is that Israelis have now raided the Indonesian hospital, in which dozens have been shot and killed point blank. So, we can expect this to continue and not cease as long as, as long as, I was going to say international pressure, but of course that's been happening. That hasn't seemed to stop Israel. I mean, the only thing that really can stop Israel is if the United States says, okay, the game is over.
Right.
I don't see that happening soon, but I would love to be proven wrong. I think that, the Israelis always, not just on this occasion, but try to get away with what they can get away with. And so this massive ethnic cleansing campaign and kind of a genocidal rampage that they've undertaken following the October 7th attack has, widespread public support within Israel itself. And it was a way for a very divided Israel at that point. You saw protests of hundreds of thousands in Israel. Like many people were saying, this is like an internal civil war going on. And so this provided an opportunity for the beleaguered prime minister, very right-wing, semi-fascist Netanyahu, who has his own not only political problems, but legal issues on corruption and so on. Right. So to salvage his own political career, he's gone full throttle in this genocidal campaign in Gaza, because saying what happened on October 7th was akin to kind of the Holocaust, and these are just Nazis that we're fighting, right, or human animals that we're fighting, and that all of the genocidal intent was there through very open and explicit statements. When you say that you're going to be there will be no food, water, electricity, and medicines, all of these things that will go in, and then you call them human animals. All of these statements put together, you can come to no other conclusion that this is a campaign of mass murder. And so we have seen that. We have seen that continue. We have seen the ground invasion, the much anticipated ground invasion happen. They are in northern Gaza. They're trying to go further and further into northern Gaza to, at some stage, really occupy Gaza City, which is kind of the center of life in Gaza, and further pushing the Palestinians, people of Gaza, to the south of Gaza, which, they say, well, that's a safe area, and we're trying to provide humanitarian corridors there. I mean, all of it is myth, as we're trying to say, kind of, deciphering myth from reality. But this is a myth. Even the humanitarian corridors are being fired at. The Israelis are using that, thinking that, well, we're going to find some more tunnels or some Hamas militants, and southern Gaza has also been bombarded throughout this. That again is a myth. So there really is no safe area for Palestinians, and what this demonstrates is a clear-cut intent by the Israelis on a full-scale ethnic cleansing, which I might add that is escalating also in the West Bank, in which while
there is no Hamas.
Yeah, well, exactly. This is the area governed by the Palestinian Authority, which were supposed to have been the allies of the Israelis, in basically managing the population of the West Bank, not letting it get out of control and protesting. So these are supposed to be the allies, but of course they can't control what's going on.
Right.
And the public sentiment is such in which they really can't even make statements. They can't do that. So now the Israelis are doing it directly, and you can say directly or indirectly through the armed settlers in the West Bank, which as the tension is diverted to Gaza, they are going on their own brutal rampage in West Bank, and now kind of dozens, if not hundreds, have been killed in the West Bank, and further displacement and the usurpation of their property and so on. So the ethnic cleansing campaign is going on there as well. And so I think that this is the attempt, of course, the international global public at the public level, unquestionably saying that the Israelis have no right to do this. They need to get out. But even the vast majority of the world's governments and countries of the world are also saying. So I think that there are all these variables at play. I think that regardless of what the Israelis want to do, whether it's reoccupy Gaza and displace the Palestinians, even and their ideal world will be, okay, let other Arab countries absorb these Palestinians, especially in Egypt. Let them cross the Rafah crossing, go into the Sinai, build a tent city for these Palestinians. The Egyptians have said absolutely not.
Of course.
As much as the dictator al-Sisi is kind of an ally in this kind of process with Israel and so on, they're saying absolutely no, we will not do that, and because even the Egyptian public is in an uproar. So even these governments that have been fairly close to Israel usually follow orders of the United States and Israel. At this particular point, in which there is such outrage in their countries, they cannot afford really right now, including the Saudis. I mean, this kind of is the broader context. In some ways, what happened on October 7th, and as Hamas says, that this was like 2 years in the planning, at least 2 years in the planning in what they did. We have to remember now, for years, not just the past year, but literally for a couple of years now, the Palestinian question has really been put to the side, almost forgotten. And all we have heard about is that first under Trump, continued under Biden, this normalization campaign in the Middle East, in which more and more Arab and Muslim countries are expected to normalize with relations with Israel, establish diplomatic relations, and basically integrate Israel as if it were like other everyday normal friendly country in the Middle East. And so that process began. Of course, we know the countries like United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, etc., did normalize. Of course, now they're kind of rethinking whether that was a good idea. But the big prize was, of course, Saudi Arabia, and that process was that was like literally happening before this, and the expectation this would be kind of the only achievement of the Biden administration if they could get the signature foreign policy achievement, if they could get the Saudis and the Israelis to establish diplomatic relations and normalize relations. So October 7th really blew that up.
Blew
right?
that up, yeah.
There is no way, however much the Saudi rulers and MBS want to do that, there's no way they can at this particular point.
Not at the moment, yeah.
Right, continue that process, and of course we've seen the opposite. MBS felt that, well, okay, this is an opportunity in which I can show that I am concerned with what's going on with the Palestinians, and he convened that Organization of Islamic Conference summit there, the Arab League summit in Riyadh, etc. Of course, it was all words and rhetoric.
Yeah.
And no action, despite the fact there were some countries that really did want to, implement some type of actions that would penalize Israel for what it's doing, including the Algerians, the Iranians, the Syrians, and even the Indonesians. But no, I mean, these countries that really have one of the main weapons, and that is, of course, the oil.
Are refusing, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. They didn't do anything. So I think that what has been one of the hopeful signs is the way not just public opinion but mobilizations of that public sentiment into mass protests and demonstrations throughout the world, including and especially so in Western capitals, and actually not just in capitals, throughout actually the countries. Here in the United States, you see local populations throughout the country organizing their own various actions. And so this has been incredibly inspiring. So the work that people have been doing over the years now for decades in terms of changing consciousness on the Israel-Palestine conflict about particularly the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and the general Palestine solidarity movement. So I say that it has worked. Because if you just watch the mainstream media, there's no way you would get this. So that type of public raising awareness and doing education work has worked. And now you have a situation, a very bizarre situation, which I've never seen this, that even within the larger population, Democrats or Republicans, the majority want a ceasefire now. In the Democratic Party, that goes up to between 70 and 80%. Of the average Democratic voter wanting a ceasefire now, which is completely not reflected in the Democratic leadership in Washington, D.C., which, the Biden administration and the congressional leadership. Now, of course, there are some Congress members, people like Rashida Tlaib and others that are calling for it. But of course, they're a small minority.
Correct.
The leader, my goodness, from Chuck Schumer, obviously all the way to Biden himself, they have been, given unhinged, unbridled support to Israel from day one. So so that's what I'm saying. That gap, I've kind of never seen such a huge gap, and it's only so long that they can get away with that. So my own, and of course this is, I don't have some magic crystal ball, but my own speculation here is that it's going to become way too politically costly for the Biden administration to continue this. I think even their UN ambassador is giving these signals back to the State Department. I don't know to what extent Tony Blinken is listening to them, but there are probably others that are saying that, look, the whole world, including Russia, which is pushing for a ceasefire and kind of abstained on this latest resolution, which again called for extended humanitarian pauses, with which the vast majority of the world is not satisfied. Of course, many of them voted for it as something, at least right now. But the vast majority of the world and the nation states want a ceasefire. So I think that in terms of the political standing of the United States, it's the moral standing, you can argue whether even a shred of it is left anymore. But that it's going to become too politically costly for the United States. I would say also for Israel, but I think that Israel usually doesn't even care. It is such a gross violator of so many UN resolutions. I'm not even sure that it really cares about international law, which is why I go back to it's going to be the United States, which ultimately tells Israel, okay, that's
enough is enough. Yeah.